Hey gentlemen, this is Vince Miller. I'm excited you're joining us today. Today's topic is how to resist passivity. How to resist passivity. Now, before we dive in, please do me a favor today. Hit that subscribe button below so you can get notified when new videos come out in this series. And I believe you're going to want to get notified so you don't miss out. So do me that favor right now. Secondly, do me another favor. Head over to the website today at beresolute.org. That's beresolute.org. Do two things for me while you're over there. First, sign up or check out the men's daily devotional. I write one fresh every day for men just like you and I. These are short, sweet, to the point devotionals that I believe will get you into the habit of kind of digging into God's Word on a regular basis, which is something we all need to do. Second, while you're over there, do me a favor, pick up some all-in gear like the hat I'm wearing right now. Support the mission and the message that I live for here, which is to live all in for Him who lived all in for us. So grab a shirt, grab a hat, sport it, share it with others. And if you want to snap a pic and share it with me over on Facebook or Instagram or wherever you socially gather today, that would be awesome. And with that, let's dive into the message for today, which is how to resist passivity. Now, I believe there's something great that happens in a man when he wants to take action in his life. That there's this passion or this vision or this desire or this conviction that rises up in a man that can be followed with some incredible action. And this can be beautiful and powerful and compelling, and it results in stories that many have told for lifetimes. And I love seeing this in men because right at that moment, they're standing on the edge of the change, right before change is about to happen. Something incredible happens right there. They're coming to the edge of life as it was, and they're raising their sights to life as it could be. But, please hear this. So many men get stuck right there, don't they? They get stuck right at the edge of the conviction gap between a feeling of conviction and then actually understanding how to act on that conviction. And for some reason, for some men, this is a very small gap. But for others, it's huge and cavernous and seems impossible to traverse. And many men get stuck right there at the edge. And they get stuck for a number of reasons. Here are a few. First, I think the first reason men get stuck is because of fear. The fear of really knowing what to do, right? Fear of leaving the comforts of the past behind. Fear of really knowing what the future is going to look like. Fear of maybe loss or change or discomfort or even the unknown in the change. And this is just one reason that men get stuck and become passive to change. The second reason is this: failure. Acting, and then maybe realizing that it didn't work the first time, or maybe the second time, or maybe the third time. And this can be very, very irritating. And thus men quit and go back to life as it was. Reason three, shame. Men know that change, right, means coming clean, right? And this coming clean is going to hurt themselves or maybe hurt others. And honestly, men are embarrassed or maybe ashamed about this. I've seen this happen a lot with men who are struggling with things like compulsions and maybe a depression. They're just ashamed to admit their issues, but even though they still want that change, they're just not sure how to go about it, right? And then reason four is pride. They feel a conviction, but honestly, they like life as it is. And often this will just progress into narcissism until they're forced to change. And these are four very popular reasons that men stand right at the edge of a conviction and never make the change they want. Therefore, what happens is they hesitate. And in this hesitation, they fail to take action, which leads to passivity. Our topic today, male pattern passivity, which is the number one killer of all great men. Now, I want to look at this from a biblical perspective because I believe the Bible has something profound to teach about this. Something profound to teach us that could be life-changing for a lot of men out there today. Men who are actually ready to take action. So if you go back to the very beginning of the Bible and just open up the very first few pages, you will see that God created all things. And after this, He creates His finest creation, which is man. In creating man, He gives man special order and design. He creates man in his image for a unique purpose, to steward the created order, and therefore God gives him a lot of responsibility. He gives him authority and dominion and power and voice, and he allows man to define and use creation as he sees fit within his will. And then he gives man a single moral rule. It's this: do not eat of the one tree situated right in the middle of the garden, containing, some special knowledge. Now, soon after, woman is created, and then soon after that, everything falls apart. Actually, it was in chapter 3, only 3 chapters in. Everything falls apart. And the reason it falls apart is because man and woman sin. They do the one thing that they were commanded not to do. They eat from the one tree that was off limits. And thus, throughout the entire Bible, sin becomes the one worldwide pandemic that has to be addressed. But don't miss this. Don't miss this in chapter 3. This sin happened because man was passive. He was passive. He did nothing and said nothing in the face of injustice and sin. And remember, man was given power and dominion and authority and voice and a single moral rule before woman was ever created. And it was his responsibility to stand up and to say something, but he didn't. Man was passive, and thus passivity is what led to sin. Now, don't get me wrong. Sin is a huge issue. It's the biggest issue of the Bible, and it's still the biggest issue in the world today. And if you don't believe me, just look at how crazy people are acting today and how sinful they are. But passivity is the problem that created that issue. Passivity. It's passivity on 2 levels, and this is very, very important. There are 2 forms of passivity that have led to all of man's problems. First, passivity to our selfish desires. We are passive to our selfish desires in that we want something for ourselves that's actually holding us back from actually stepping off that ledge. Another way to say this is that we see like a personal benefit we're really not ready to give up yet. Therefore, we become passive to our selfish desires and we just follow them. Second, it's not just passivity to our selfish desires, but passivity to the righteousness of God. And it's this that's also concerning. It's passive to God and his prompting on how to live life. It's passive to God's best design for man and his authority and his power and his voice and his morality in this world. And it's this hesitation that we must hurdle. But both of them. So to resist passivity and encounter change and hurdle the conviction gap, we need to take 2 forms of action. Actually, 2 forms. First, we need an action against, and second, we need an action for. An action against and an action for, and they actually both happen simultaneously at the same time. And I'm going to use one verse to hammer this home. One verse to hammer this. It's James 4:7. Here's how it reads. It says, "Submit yourselves therefore to God, resist the devil, and he will flee from you." That's it. Submit yourselves to God, resist the devil, and he will flee from you. So we need 2 forms of action, right? 2 forms of action. First, we need an action against. And the action against is an action against sin. It's an action against selfishness, against the devil, as James says in this verse. Now, for those of us who are Christian men listening today, you know what this means. This means you can no longer be for yourself in that area of sin in your life where you want change. If you're experiencing a conviction for change, then you cannot be passive to that sin any longer. You must be actively opposed to that sin. Actively opposed to all the actions that lead to that sin and the desires that cause the sin in the first place, all of it. You must be willing to go all in, all the way against that sin, so much so that you hate it. You're disgusted by it. The thought of it just makes you vomit a little bit in your mouth, right? It repulses you like a bad taste you never want to experience ever again. So that's the first action. It must be an action against. Second, we not only need an action against, but we need an action for. And the action for is for God. It's for God and what is righteous. Now, let me hit the pause button here just for a second, right? Just hit the pause button. I'll come back to the point in just a second. You see, a lot of men out there want change in their life. And they believe that stopping bad behaviors is enough. That just stopping some of the bad things that they're doing will suffice. This is a corrupt and false and wrong belief. It's totally wrong. For example, if one of your New Year's resolutions, let's say, was to stop cursing, then yes, you need to remove certain words from your language. But at the same time, you also need to find new words that you can use to express yourself, right? And this is true about everything, that there must be a force against something, but there must be a force for something. You can't just stop something without starting something new, fellas, right? It's because you have to stop and stop and stop, and you have to at the same time simultaneously start, and start. And this is the problem with some Christian men. We know what they're against, but not what they're for. So now let's back up to the point. We need also an action for God. We can't merely be against sin. We must also be for God, and we must give a full effort for Him. We must start a counter action that is for God, and we must pursue something holy for God, to leap the gap. And this is the point that James makes. He makes submit and resist. Submit and resist. It's an action with a counteraction. And this is how we fight and resist passivity in this life. This is what it looks like to take action. Now listen to this. This last part, it's actually critical. I think too many men get stuck spiritually because they're only acting against their sin. And they act against it, and against it, and against it. And therefore, eventually they get exhausted, and completely and totally exhausted, and stuck in cycles of sin because all they're doing is just simply resisting on one side of the fence. They have to actually start something new at the same time. They got to move into holy action. You can't just stop resisting sin. You must start doing action for God. And this is why so many men have so many powerful testimonies. Yes, they resisted sin and temptation in their life, but they started an effort for God, which sometimes becomes a ministry for Him. And they get fired up about it, and it creates an epidemic of change, not just an epidemic of sin, an epidemic of change in their life. And they become a force, a holy force for God. So fellas, today, if you want to resist passivity, you must do both. You must take action against sin and take action for God and do it simultaneously. It is a great 1-2 punch that happens at the same time. And fellas, you know you want to be that man. You know you want to resist passivity and leap the gap. To do that, you must do both. And to do both, this means this. You have to go all in. All in against sin and all in for God. Join me in doing that today. I love you guys. Peace.